Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was working at this busy gas station right off the freeway. The place was always packed with truckers, road trippers, and locals grabbing their morning coffee. I've been there for about 8 months when disaster struck in the most ridiculous way possible. I was reaching for my water bottle during my shift when something in my bag just gave out. Turns out I'd slipped a disc between my lower vertebrae. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. For months, I couldn't do anything for myself. My own mother had to help me get dressed like I was 5 years old again. The doctors had me on heavy painkillers because even coughing would send shooting pain down my legs and make them buckle. I went through countless physical therapy sessions, back specialists, and sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever feel normal again. The company's workers' compensation covered everything, which honestly probably saved me from needing multiple spinal surgeries. I wasn't bitter about it happening at work. Accidents happen, right? But I was grateful the paperwork went through smoothly since it happened on their property. After months of recovery, the doctors finally cleared me to return to work on limited hours. I was nervous but excited to get some normalcy back in my life. The management put me on 4-hour shifts to start, and I could feel everyone watching me, making sure I wasn't going to collapse or file another claim. One day, I came in with a scratchy throat that was getting worse when my shift went on. Normally, we were allowed to grab one free coffee during our shift. It was a small perk that kept morale up during long days. I walked up to the assistant manager, who I'd always gotten along with pretty well. I asked him if it would be okay to grab a slushie instead of coffee that day, since my throat was really bothering me, and the cold might help. He told me that was totally fine and suggested I put it in a coffee cup so it looked official. I thought that was reasonable enough. I grabbed a small slushie, poured it into a coffee cup like he suggested, and sipped it throughout my shift. The cold definitely helped soothe my throat, and I didn't think anything more of it. The next morning at 7 a.m. I woke up to an official email from corporate. The subject line made my stomach drop when I read about immediate suspension for serious breach of conduct. I read it 3 times, convinced there had to be some mistake. I was being suspended without pay pending an investigation into theft. I immediately called the store and requested a meeting to clear up whatever misunderstanding this was. They scheduled it for 2 days later, which gave me plenty of time to panic and wonder what I could have possibly done wrong. The day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room in the building next door to the store. Sitting around the table were me and my support person, the assistant manager, the store manager, and 2 people from human resources who had clearly driven a long way to be there. This felt way too serious for whatever minor issue they thought had happened. The store manager announced that they'd call me there for an offense that could result in immediate termination. At this point, my heart was pounding. I felt like I was going through airport security wondering if someone had planted drugs in my luggage. What could I have possibly done that was so serious? I asked them to please tell me what this was about. The store manager then asked me in the most condescending tone if I understood the definition of stealing. The way he said it was the first red flag, but I was still confused. I told him I'd like to think I understood what stealing meant. The store manager was this short, dramatic guy in his 50s who always made everything about himself. He leaned forward like he was delivering the most important news of the century and explained that on Monday I had drunk a slushie out of a coffee cup, which was considered theft and a breach of company policy. Relief washed over me immediately. This was just a misunderstanding. I explained that this was easily cleared up because I had asked the assistant manager before I took anything. I thought it was the same value as coffee, but I had double-checked and gotten permission first. I smiled and looked over at the assistant manager, expecting him to back me up and end this ridiculous meeting. Instead, he looked me straight in the eyes and claimed that our conversation had never happened. The silence in that room was deafening. My jaw literally dropped. I looked back and forth between everyone, waiting for someone to say this was a joke. 170 different scenarios ran through my head in those few seconds. The confusion hit first, then shock, then anger, and finally, acceptance. Here I was, still recovering from a back injury that had turned my life upside down, trying my best to get back on my feet, and these people were setting me up over 3 cents worth of slushy mix so they could get rid of me and probably earn some bonus for reducing staff costs. Something strange happened then. All the anger and injustice I was feeling just melted away. I let out a big sigh and started smiling. I looked directly at the store manager and suddenly remembered something I'd seen the week before. I told them I was clearly confused about something, but I wanted to ask a question to make sure I understood the definition of theft correctly. I stared right at the store manager without breaking eye contact and described how the week before I had watched him deliberately knock a package of cookies off the shelf, say oops, and then write it off as damaged so he could eat it during his morning meeting. I asked if that would be considered stealing. I watched his face go completely white. I could sense the HR people slowly turning to look at him, but I wasn't done. I was taking everyone down with me. I continued by questioning whether the assistant manager was a reliable source of information, given that he had been having sex with one of the cashiers in the employee bathroom during work hours, while his wife was at home with their 2-year-old and pregnant with their second child. The assistant manager looked like he was going to be sick. The HR people looked like they needed medical attention. But I still wasn't finished. I went on to mention that about half the staff smoked marijuana on their lunch breaks, which I was sure they'd noticed from the smell. I also brought up the issue of people eating expired food from the hot case, employees giving free drinks to their friends, and people leaving early but clocking out at their scheduled time. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out every single policy violation I'd witnessed in just the past week alone. There were only 2 people in that entire 24-hour operation that I actually liked, and I made sure to mention that the management was clearly not paying attention to what was happening in their own store. The store manager quickly announced that they needed to end the meeting. 3 days later, I'd already mentally moved on. I was still offended by the whole situation, but I figured I was young enough to start over somewhere else. Then HR called and asked me to come in for another meeting. I prepared myself to be officially fired and had already checked out emotionally. There was no way I could go back and work with people who had thrown me under the bus like that. When I sat down, the HR representatives were practically groveling. They offered me the assistant manager position. I asked what had happened to the current assistant manager. The HR representative explained that he and the cashier had both quit because his wife had found out about the affair and had been trying to confront the other woman every time she came to work. They also had to terminate 18 employees after reviewing security footage based on my information, including the store manager. They asked me to take some time to think about their offer. I walked back over to the main store to grab something from my locker, and there was the store manager in his office crying while packing his belongings into a cardboard box like some scene from a movie. I had a spring in my step when I knocked on his door and asked what was wrong and why he was crying. He told me through tears that he was going on indefinite leave for personal reasons. I expressed fake sympathy and said I hoped everything would work out for him. 3 days later, I quit and used my credit card to fly to another country for 2 weeks. It was the best vacation of my life, funded entirely by the satisfaction of watching that whole corrupt system crumble around the people who had tried to destroy me over a slushie. I'm a police officer in a small town where everyone knows everyone. Been on the force for 12 years now, and I've seen my share of crazy situations. But nothing prepared me for what happened at the playground last Tuesday. My 4-year-old son had been begging me to take him to the new playground they built near the community center. Since I had the day off, I figured why not. The kid deserves some fun time with his dad, especially since my job keeps me busy most evenings. We got to the playground around 2 p.m. It was pretty quiet, just a few other parents with their kids scattered around. My son immediately ran to the swing set, so I pushed him for a while before he spotted the big slide and took off running. I settled on a bench nearby where I could keep an eye on him while scrolling through some work emails on my phone. That's when I noticed her. Middle-aged woman, probably in her 50s, with that haircut that screams manager complaints. She was standing by the fence, not with any kids, just watching. At first, I thought maybe she was waiting for someone, but something felt off about the way she was staring at the children. My son was playing with a couple other kids by the monkey bars when this woman started walking toward them. I looked up from my phone and kept watching. She approached my son, crouching down to his level. The woman asked my son what his name was in a sweet voice. My son, being the friendly kid he is, told her his name. I was about to get up and intervene when she continued talking. She told him what a nice name he had, then mentioned that she had some really cool toys in her car that were much better than the old playground. She asked if he wanted to come see them. That's when every alarm bell in my head started going off. I stood up immediately and started walking over, but I wanted to see how far she pushed this. My son told her he couldn't go anywhere without his daddy. The woman brushed off his concern, saying his daddy wouldn't mind and they would just take a quick look and come right back. She promised it would be fine. She actually reached out and grabbed my son's hand, trying to pull him toward the parking lot. That's when I stepped in. I asked her what she was doing. The woman looked up at me, clearly annoyed that I'd interrupted her. She said she was just being friendly with a sweet little boy and claimed he wanted to see her toys. I told her no, he didn't, and demanded she let go of his hand right now. The woman got defensive, saying she didn't know who I thought I was, but this was a public playground, and she could talk to whoever she wanted. I told her that I was his father, and what she was doing was called attempted kidnapping. That's when her whole demeanor changed. Instead of backing down like any normal person would, she got aggressive. She accused me of being insane for calling it kidnapping, claiming she was just being nice to him. She suggested that maybe if I was watching my kid instead of playing on my phone, I'd know he wanted to come with her. I told her she needed to step away from my son immediately. She refused, saying she didn't have to do anything I said because I wasn't the boss of her. She still had hold of my son's hand and was trying to pull him away from me. My son started crying, clearly scared and confused. Other parents at the playground were starting to notice the commotion. I warned her to let go of him or I would call the police. She told me to go ahead and call them, insisting she wasn't doing anything wrong. She claimed the boy clearly wanted to come with her and there was nothing I could do about it. I pulled out my phone and called dispatch. The woman saw this and her eyes lit up with some kind of twisted satisfaction. She said yes, call the police because she would tell them how I was being aggressive and threatening her for no reason. I identified myself as Officer Johnson and requested backup at the community center playground for an attempted kidnapping in progress. The woman's face went white when she heard me identify myself as a police officer, but instead of letting go and running, she doubled down. She accused me of lying, saying I wasn't a cop because real cops didn't look like me. I ordered her to release my son's hand and step back immediately. She refused to go anywhere, calling it harassment. By now, she was actively trying to drag my crying son toward the parking lot. I grabbed my son's other hand and pulled him away from her, picking him up to keep him safe. She actually lunged at me, trying to grab him back. She demanded I give him back to her, insisting he was coming with her. I told her she needed to calm down and step away immediately. She refused to go anywhere without him. Within 3 minutes, I could hear the sirens. Living in a small town has its perks. Backup arrives fast, especially when it's one of their own calling for help. But I wasn't expecting what happened next. The first patrol car pulled into the parking lot, followed by another, then another. By the time it was over, there were 8 patrol cars surrounding the playground. Apparently, when someone tries to kidnap a cop's kid, the entire force responds. The woman finally seemed to realize she was in serious trouble when she saw all the police cars. She let go of my son and started backing away. She called the whole situation ridiculous, claiming she wasn't doing anything wrong and that I had attacked her for no reason. My sergeant walked over to where we were standing. He'd been my partner for years before getting promoted, so he knew my son well. My sergeant asked what the situation was. I explained that this woman had attempted to lure my son away from the playground, grabbed him when he refused, and tried to physically drag him to her car. The sergeant asked the woman if this was true. She denied it completely, claiming she was just being friendly and that I was making the whole thing up because I was embarrassed about being a bad parent. The sergeant looked at the other parents who had witnessed the whole thing. Three of them immediately stepped forward to confirm what had happened. One of them had even started recording on her phone when things got heated. One parent witness told the officer she had seen the whole thing. She confirmed that the woman had definitely tried to take the little boy, grabbed his hand, and was pulling him toward the parking lot. She said the woman wouldn't let go even when he started crying. The woman realized she was outnumbered and started getting hysterical. She screamed that this was insane and that they couldn't arrest her for talking to a child. She insisted she had rights. My sergeant told her she was under arrest for attempted kidnapping and child endangerment. She claimed this was discrimination and that they were only arresting her because she was a woman. When they put her in handcuffs, she kept screaming about how unfair everything was and how she was going to sue everyone involved. She demanded to speak to someone in charge, not realizing that half the department's leadership was standing right there. She wanted to speak to their supervisor, claiming this was police brutality. The sergeant told her he was the supervisor. She then demanded to speak to his supervisor. The captain, who had just arrived, told her that would be him. The captain had just arrived and heard the tail end of her ranting. The woman's face went through about 5 different emotions when she realized just how badly she'd messed up. She yelled that this wasn't over and that she was calling her lawyer. She said they would all be sorry. The captain calmly told her that attempting to kidnap a police officer's child while surrounded by witnesses wasn't the hill she wanted to die on. When they loaded her into the patrol car, she was still screaming about how she was the victim in all this. The whole scene was so bizarre that even the other parents were just standing there shaking their heads. My son was pretty shaken up by the whole thing, so I took him home early. Later that evening, my sergeant called to let me know that the woman had a history of similar incidents in neighboring towns. Apparently, this wasn't her first time trying to lure children away from playgrounds. She was charged with attempted kidnapping, child endangerment, and resisting arrest. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, but between the witness statements, the phone video, and her own behavior at the scene, the case was pretty solid. During her arraignment, she actually asked the judge if she could represent herself because she didn't trust her lawyer. The judge granted her request, and she proceeded to argue that she was a real victim because everyone was being mean to her. She got 18 months in prison. My wife and I have been married for 3 years. We struggled with fertility issues for almost 2 years before finally getting pregnant. This pregnancy means everything to us. We've been through multiple failed attempts, doctor visits, and heartbreak. When we found out we were having a girl, we were over the moon. I've been talking to her through my wife's belly every night, feeling for kicks, planning her nursery. This baby is our miracle. 3 weeks ago, we scheduled our 20-week ultrasound for Wednesday at 10 a.m. It's closer to 22 weeks now, but this is the big one where they check everything, make sure she's healthy, growing properly, all that important stuff. We've been counting down the days. My grandfather raised me when my parents divorced when I was 8. He taught me how to fish, how to change a tire, how to be a man. He's been declining for months, and last week the family knew it was close. When he passed away 2 nights ago, I was heartbroken but not surprised. My father called me the next morning to tell me the funeral will be Wednesday at 10 a.m., the exact same time as our ultrasound. The funeral is a 4-hour drive north to my father's hometown. My wife suggested I go alone since she wanted to stay home with our dogs instead of boarding them. I asked my father if we could possibly reschedule, but he explained that the funeral home only had that slot available, and we had family coming from out of state who couldn't change their flights. That's when things got complicated. My wife accused me of choosing a dead person over our living daughter. I tried to explain that it wasn't fair to put it that way, that this was my grandfather's funeral, and asked if we could reschedule the ultrasound instead. She told me we couldn't because she had already moved it once because of my work trip, and the doctor was booked solid for weeks. I suggested we could video call during the ultrasound, knowing it wasn't the same but trying to find a solution. She was shocked, asking if I was kidding, saying this was one of the most important appointments of our pregnancy. I tried explaining how much my grandfather meant to me, how I was asked to be a pallbearer, how my family was counting on me. But she kept getting more upset, insisting that my daughter should come first now, that my grandfather was gone but our daughter needed her father. I argued back that she needed her father, but she wasn't even born yet, while my grandfather needed me to carry his coffin. She called me selfish, and the argument went on for hours. I was torn apart inside, excited about seeing our baby girl, but devastated about missing my grandfather's funeral. My wife finally stormed off to bed without speaking to me. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my father and explained the situation. He was understanding and said he'd ask my cousin to take my place as pallbearer. It broke my heart, but I chose to go to the ultrasound. We drove to the doctor's office in complete silence. I was still grieving and honestly resentful about missing the funeral, but I thought this would make my wife happy. We checked in and sat in the waiting room. That's when Karen walked in. I'd seen Karen before at previous appointments. She's one of those women who acts like she owns every space she enters. Loud voice, always complaining about something, treats the staff terribly. She was there for her appointment too, apparently running late. Karen walked up to the reception desk and demanded to go in immediately because she was late for her appointment. The receptionist apologized but explained that she would need to wait because they were running behind due to an emergency earlier that morning. Karen insisted that wasn't her problem and that she had other appointments that day. She noticed my wife and me sitting there quietly and asked if we were waiting for ultrasounds too. My wife said we had the 10 o'clock appointment. Karen said that since she had the 9:30 appointment, she should go first. I told her that wasn't really how it worked and that we all just had to wait our turn. Karen looked at me like I'd personally offended her entire family. She asked if I knew who she was, bragging that her husband was a lawyer and they didn't wait for anyone. I was already having the worst day of my life, missing my grandfather's funeral to be there, and this woman was making it worse. I told her that we were all waiting and that her husband, being a lawyer, didn't make her more important than anyone else. Karen got even more upset, claiming she was more important because she was 8 months pregnant with her 4th child, while we were probably first-time parents who didn't even know what we were doing. My wife started crying, not just because of Karen, but because of everything, the stress, the hormones, our fight about the funeral. Karen rolled her eyes and complained that now my wife was crying, adding that this was exactly why young people shouldn't have babies. That's when I lost it. I told her I didn't know what her problem was, but explained that my wife and I had been trying to have this baby for 2 years, that today was supposed to be special for us, and she was ruining it with her attitude. Karen got a cruel look in her eyes and suggested that maybe there was a reason we couldn't get pregnant for 2 years. Maybe we weren't meant to be parents. The entire waiting room went silent. Even the receptionist looked shocked. My wife asked how she dared say that to us. Karen shrugged and said she was just being honest, that some people weren't cut out for parenthood. That's when the doctor's office manager came out, having heard the commotion. She told Karen she needed to lower her voice because she was disturbing other patients. Karen immediately blamed us, claiming we had started it and were being rude to her. The manager said that from what she had heard, Karen had made inappropriate comments about our fertility struggles, which was completely unacceptable. Karen insisted she had the right to speak her mind, but the manager told her that she didn't have that right in their office. She told Karen that she would have to ask her to leave. Karen was outraged, shouting that they couldn't kick her out because she was a patient there. The manager explained that they could actually refuse service to anyone who created the hostile environment, and that Karen's appointment was being cancelled. Karen started screaming about discrimination and threatening to sue. 2 security guards from the building came up and escorted her out while she yelled about calling her lawyer husband. The manager came over to us and apologized for what had happened. She offered to get us in for our ultrasound right away to make up for the terrible experience. When we walked back to the exam room, my wife took my hand and apologized about my grandfather and about what Karen had said to us. I apologized too for everything that had happened between us. The ultrasound was beautiful. Our daughter is healthy and perfect. We got pictures to send to my family, and my father called during the appointment to tell me how the funeral went. He said my grandfather would have wanted me to be there with my wife and daughter. Later that day, we found out that Karen had been banned from the entire medical building. Apparently, she'd caused problems at other offices too, and our incident was the final straw. My wife said Karen got what she deserved, that no one should talk to people the way she had talked to us. I agreed, saying I just couldn't believe someone would say those things to strangers. My wife nodded, commenting that some people think they're entitled to treat others however they want. We decided to name our daughter after my grandfather. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.